Okay, let's call to order this meeting of the Policy Committee on Wednesday, not March 25th. It is Tuesday, April 28th at 3 o'clock.
A full month behind when I originally scheduled it.
It is. That's not accurate.
I will apologize to everybody again if that was my rescheduling fiasco. But
Mr. Durbin, could you do me a favor, please?
yeah.
For those that are viewing outside audience who may not know who you are, can you tell us who you are, who you represent, and what this meeting is about today, please?
Oh, okay. My name's Tom Durbin, and I am an associate of a company called Neola Inc. And we are a policy development company. Forest Hills has been a client for over 10 years now, and we do policy revisions, updates, new policy, all kinds of different things in relation to policy for school districts in 6 different states. My territory is the southwest corner of Ohio, and my experience right now, I'm doing these meetings with 51 school districts, the same policy revisions that you're going to see here today. So that's my experience. And at one point, I was an interim at Forest Hills and was cured.
I was going to ask you to add that because that does always add an extra layer of knowledge to these meetings that I always appreciate.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I learned a lot at Forest Hills. I will say that. I enjoyed my time there, but I have to admit I am enjoying my retirement life even more now. And on May 1st, I get to apply for Medicare. So where I am right now, I am in the private section of board docs that you have to have a log on for. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you one. This is the update for the spring. So we do 2 updates a year. We do one in the fall and one in the spring. The fall update was volume 38, number 1. This update you'll see is volume 38, number 2. And I can tell you that the work on volume 39, number 1 is currently in progress. So it's nonstop in the old land, because as long as we have people in Columbus passing laws, we will have policy revisions. So what I'm going to start with today, this is the overview, and I think that Elizabeth, you and Scott probably have this in your packet someplace. And what I'm going to do is to show you where I'm going to begin, and it's with the reminders right here. But I've done something a little bit different this year, this update, because of how we have to do these meetings. So what I've done is to copy and paste and highlight some information so that you can see it better on my screen. And the reminders we put out, 1 is minimum wage went up. 2, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS rate has gone down 0.5 cents, and quite frankly, I expect that to go down even more. And then also you'll see some required postings that we like to remind our clients of. And because with these required postings that you have to put up, I would like to go to your site again, and you have a special release, and it's called the Student Handbook and Annual Notice piece. With the annual notices, this is a document that we provide all of our clients in regards to what is required by law. These are notices, for example, Civil Rights Compliance Officer name and number in the student handbooks and district website, so everybody knows who that person is. A non-discrimination notice, that's a piece you put out. You do not discriminate in employment or educational practice. That's everywhere. So these are some of the requirements by law. I do want to point out to those of you at the board level and administrative level, what you see in blue on that list, these are additions to the notices this year, but you will see a very few that are struck through or being removed. So these are all required by law, and we're going to talk more about this alcohol and drug testing for the Department of Transportation when we talk about a policy just a little bit. And you can see there's.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. Yeah, so who, Scott, who in our district is responsible for keeping tabs on this, making sure that all these things are done? Is that one person?
No,
Scott, do you care if I take this?
yes, you may, because yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yes. What I do is when we get the annual notices every year from Neola, I make a Google Doc, and it's shared with all of the cabinet members. And their names are next to who's in charge of what. And then I have a column that says, what are we doing to be in compliance? And I have a tab for every single year of annual notices, and everybody has to fill them out. And we do it right before school starts. I give it to the cabinet members in like May, and then they have to have it completed before school starts. So we've got it for all years.
Beautiful.
And then you'll see some required postings. These are pieces. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say, Susan. So good. Thank you.
Well, and just to join in on that, Elizabeth, there's some of this, just like the wellness policy, the report, that would be the wellness committee that would be doing that for you. So this is a treasure about the rewards on a credit card. There's all different people that have to be involved with this piece. The emergency management plans, that's all through probably John Eckert still doing that. There's a lot of different people because of all these postings. These are pieces that actually have to be hung up in buildings, all right, or on the website. So required postings, and then you'll see recommended by board policy or district administrative guidelines, okay? Pretty important document that I would encourage everybody to review each year and make sure you're covered there. So then the next piece has to do with the legal alerts that we provide to our clients, and there's 6 different legal alerts this time. And you'll see the first one has to do with OTES and OPES. With OTES and OPES, what I'm going to tell you about this document and the legal alert is just ignore it. And the reason I'm saying that is that, again, in your board docs site, there is another special update, and it's right here. It has to do with OTES 2.0. And there is a legal alert with this one. And basically what I want to tell you with this one is, one, in the legal alert from the spring that said that you had to have a revised policy by July 1st of 2020. And there was a caveat as to who was required to implement for the 2021 school year and who did not have to. Well, that all went by the wayside when the coronavirus hit. So House Bill 197 has pretty much taken care of that particular legal alert, in that well, I'm trying to find what I did with it now.
Tom, our Board of Education sort of recognized this, working with our Teachers Association, and last night we passed an MOU on OTES and teacher evaluations for this school year. So I think that there's been some conversation with you even prior to this meeting about that and what might be coming. So we've passed that MOU. I don't want to cut you off. I'm just saying.
No.
The board addressed this last night.
Appreciate that, but I just want to remind you that even with House Bill 197, the revised policy must be in place by September 1st of 2020. But if you delay the implementation to the 21-22 school year, that's perfectly acceptable. But when you revise your policy, what I would encourage you to consider doing, that if you're going to hold off on implementation as provided by House Bill 197, that when you do your resolution to revise your policy, that you would put an effective date with that so that everyone knows exactly when that's going to happen. So that OTES, the other thing they've asked us to share with our clients has to do with the fact that the OTES policy template is a template, and it has to be shared with your teacher evaluation committee. And if you are going to make changes to the template that we have provided for you, then we do suggest you make sure with your legal counsel that it's the proper thing to do. So enough on OTES. The next thing has to do with non-routine use of school buses. This was a legal alert brought out because of the administrative code that's been interpreted by ODE in a little different manner. You have a policy 8651 in regards to non-routine use of school buses. We are not making a change to the policy just yet, but ODE is basically saying to us that if a district uses a school bus for a non-routine use, then that bus becomes a private commercial vehicle. Therefore, you need to have insurance, need to have a different type of inspection, and the driver would have to have the Department of Transportation physical, rather, and in addition to their T8, which is a bus driver physical. So as an example of a non-routine use was, seems like many moons ago, that there was a paddle fest down the river when I was at New Richmond, and they would take their kayaks and paddle down the river to New Richmond. They would put their kayaks on the shore. We would take a bus and take the kayakers back up to their cars. That would be a non-routine use of buses now. So you just need to be careful with that if you're using the buses for anything other than school transportation. But also in this legal alert, it does say that if you are using it for such as an agency as Highways Work First or the elderly, you are approved to do that. The next legal alert has.
When does this go into effect, Tom?
Well, see, that's the problem, Scott, because ODE has provided their interpretation, but we haven't seen anything yet, according to the attorneys that do this work for Neola, that we should be changing our policy yet. So I would just be real cautious about how I use the buses for non-routine use. The effective date is the part that is really difficult for me to tell you what that effective date is. And you'll see down here that ODE supports this interpretation, but there are some efforts to address this peculiar interpretation by ODE.
You see, typically, I think as superintendents, you as a former superintendent and me in the role that I'm in now, would be very careful about using our buses for anything other than transporting our students to and from school. But
Yep.
The interesting conversation that I was in the other day, given the COVID environment that we are involved in, is that we might be using our buses to transport food to families. We might be using our buses to be at the beginning of a parade that we are putting together in our elementaries. And so if we're not in a circumstance right now where we have an absolute requirement or policy, notwithstanding the cautionary conversation that you're having with us, we're still not in a place where we are illegally operating if we're doing these things in this unfortunate environment, correct?
Oh, I think you're totally legal in what you're doing, Scott. And that's, as a superintendent, I would argue the fact that you're transporting food because that is a function of the school. I would say that if you're transporting kids to a parade as a function of the school, I mean, anytime, and that's the piece that I really would stress, is the fact that you're transporting students to or from a school session or a school function. And the whole food delivery piece, I think, is a definite school function just due to federal laws on what we have to do in regards to the transportation of food to kids, making sure they get fed. So, Yeah, I think that, what you're doing is 100% within the guidelines is what we're talking here. I think this probably would be more of if I would call you up and say, "Hey, Scott, hey, listen, I want to rent a bus. There's a group of guys, and we're gonna run down to UC and play basketball, and we just need transportation." That's a whole different issue. So what you're doing, you're totally above board, in my opinion, as a superintendent. Substitute teaching license. There are 4 new types of substitute teaching license. And are you guys a part of that COG with substitutes? Hello.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why I like face to face. I know when I'm talking, people are even looking away or whatever. But the 4 types of sublicense, the one would be someone like myself that has a degree in education. I could get a sublicense where I could teach for an unlimited number of days in any grade or subject level. The second type of sublicense that are now being issued would be for that person that may have a degree in history, excuse me, but does not have the education background. Then when they get a sublicense, they could teach an unlimited number of days in history. But for any other subject area in an extended period of time, they could only teach for up to 1 semester. And then if it carries into the second semester, the board would have to approve them for that second semester. The third type of sublicense would be someone that may have a degree such as a liberal arts degree where they don't have a core subject area. That person is limited to the 1 semester rule as far as the number of days they can teach in any one assignment. So they fall into that same approval category for each semester. We do have a policy 3120.04 in substitutes that we're going to review today, and I'll show you where that information is as well. And the approval piece by boards of education, I'll point out right now, is not an employment piece. It's just approving that person to be in that position. Emotional support, therapy dogs, comfort animals. There's a nice legal alert here. And the first thing I'll point out that this legal alert says is that an emotional support, comfort animals, or therapy dogs are not service animals. They're different. Service animals have a specific function they're trained to do. So this particular legal alert just is being put out only because of the number of districts that are currently using therapy dogs, comfort animals, so forth. And what this is saying in this legal alert is that if a student does not have a disability where they're on a 504, they're not on an IEP, then technically they do not have a right to have a comfort animal, therapy animal, or support animal at school. All right. When a child has a disability where they have a service animal, that service animal is protected by ADA, and they're performing a task, and so they definitely have that right to have that animal. What this particular legal alert goes into talk about is that student that does have a disability that would happen to have an IEP or maybe a 504, in which they want to have their service animal, or excuse me, correct that, their comfort animal or a support animal with them at school. And the legal alert just talks about that the IEP team or 504 team should request documentation from the student's healthcare provider as to why that student may need that emotional support animal with them before making a decision to allow. The other piece is a caution to be take under consideration is whether or not to list that animal as an accommodation. One of the pieces that they suggest in here is that if the child has the support comfort animal, then rather than putting it as an accommodation, it may be that he or she is permitted to bring the animal with them rather than listing it as an accommodation, because if it is an accommodation, it could be the district would be responsible for the cost of taking care of that animal. So just be cautious. And then the other piece is, when you determine whether or not that animal should be brought in. There's some factors we list here that you might want to consider. When it comes to employees and service animals or emotional support animals, they should be providing you with documentation also that they have a physical and mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities. And then if they do, then you guys are aware you have to provide some form of an accommodation. But just keep in mind it does not always have to be the preferred accommodation. Okay, you have a right to make the accommodation as well. School-owned therapy dogs. Before you go out and buy some, we've listed some pieces that you may want to take under consideration before you do that. I'll share the story that I heard during these updates this spring as the guidance counselor convinced the superintendent that they needed a support animal at school and agreed to buy the dog if the district would pay for the training. And so that's what happened. The guidance person bought the dog, district paid for the training, and after about a year, the guidance counselor took another position and took the dog with him. So keep in mind. FMLA, using FMLA leave for IEP meetings. This was requested. It was an opinion request from the Department of Labor. An employee who had 2 children who had some very serious health conditions wanted to know if they could use FMLA leave to take care of the children, medical appointments, IEP meetings. Well, the ruling from the Department of Labor was that because the children both had a serious health condition that was certified by a healthcare provider, then that would be a reasonable request to use FMLA leave for attending IEP meetings. So something you may never have, but you never know.
Tom, along these lines, don't want to slow this meeting down, but I'm certain that your team is starting to take a look at all the related issues with COVID-19 and preconditions that people may have with coming to work, their fear of coming to work, potentially being exposed, taking it home to elderlies or other people who are working or who are living in their homes that cannot be exposed to this, who are vulnerable at a different level because of some precondition that they have. I don't want to get in a glass half empty perspective during this meeting, but those are all things that are starting to be discussed, I would imagine, at Neola and other places who are working on policies. Yes, no?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how much we're talking about that yet, Scott, and I say that because I don't know. But I would think that there are others that may be looking at those issues in regards to how it fits within how the laws are written. Primarily attorneys. And since we have attorneys working for us, I'm guessing that's in the back of their minds right now, but I can't answer whether or not Neola is actually doing that because I just don't know. Is that fair enough?
Yes, I'm nodding to try to limit.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have
your time.
I don't have you on my.
You can't see me. You're presenting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not being disrespectful, Tom. I'm sorry. My colleagues all see me going up and down or shaking left or right.
Okay.
Thank you for that information. I appreciate it. Please move on, sir.
I'll ask that question though because I know there's a lot of things on the table right now. The last legal alert has to do with random drug testing of CDL license holders. And this is an important one because the rules changed. The previous testing percentage was 25% of your drivers had to be tested for alcohol or drugs. That percentage went up to 50% as of January the 1st of 2020. Okay. Along with that change, there's now a new clearinghouse, and it is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Administration Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. And the reason this is important is that when drivers get tested, and if I remember correctly from my time there, that the drivers are part of a consortium in Hamilton County. When they go to one location, there's a third-party administrator that draws the names and all, and then they go get tested. When they get tested, that third-party administrator is now required to report any violations to this new drug and alcohol clearinghouse database. But on the other hand, what the other thing that's important, and you guys, is Richard still there as transportation?
Yes.
Okay, he's probably on top of this already.
And John Eckert is with us, and he works closely with Richard on subjects like this, safety, security. So John's
okay,
also part of this meeting.
Hi, John. So
Hey,
then, what's important to know is that employers, which include school districts, must query the clearinghouse at least once per year for each driver that you have. In addition, you have to maintain the records of all the queries and the information obtained. So you have to set up an account with this Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, and then you have to go in and query each driver. There's some steps to go through to set these accounts up, but I know a lot of school districts are already on top of this and have already been doing this. This all became effective January the 6th with the clearinghouse. So this is one that you'll definitely want to check into ASAP. This also includes all the sub drivers as well. All right, then we get to the policies. Elizabeth's favorite part about being a board member. And in the overview, we have, I'm going to just go through this real quickly and share why we're changing the policies. And all this information, again, is still in that overview section. These 5 policies you see on the screen, they have a section that's being added that helps to limit treasurer liability. And I know Lana will enjoy hearing that. And what happens is the superintendent's required to present a written statement that everybody has the proper license or reports that are required before they can be paid. The second piece has to do with gifted identification. And what we have found is that we're now required to provide you with an opt-out of services for your policy, and also something that says you're going to follow all prescribed timelines. So those are 2 issues we have put into the gifted policy. And as a reminder that when you revise policy, then you revise your district plan, and that plan and policy has to be filed with ODE on an annual basis. When it comes to 3120 and 4120, the highly qualified teacher is no longer, because No Child Left Behind is gone. So we have listed requirements for teachers. And then we've also listed some new pieces for Title I paraprofessionals. 3120.04, this has to do with that legal alert that I was talking about earlier as far as substitute teaching goes. Employment contract has to do with the contract status of your classified employees. That law changed where the previous law was a 1-year, 2-year continuing contract. And now it is a 1-year, 2-year, 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 then continuing contract for classified employees. Now, I will say to you that there is an option in the policy when we get to it in regards to bargaining units of classified employees. And I know there's a bargaining unit at Forest Hills. And so one of the things you have to check is that whether or not you have a contract sequence in your current collective bargaining agreement. Prior to this law changing, most contracts were silent only because the 1-2 continuing was so favorable. But with the 1-2-2-2, the 7-year piece, that has changed some with collective bargaining agreements. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of water. It's been, this was my 3rd update session of the day. I have no idea how I did that. Policy 4162 has to do with drug and alcohol testing of CDL license holders. And we will review the changes in there, including the FMCIS clearinghouse and also federal regulations. Graduation requirements. This one is being revised with the latest information we have, but I will tell you this is not the last of the information we'll have as far as graduation requirements. And we also include a piece about diploma seals. Last fall, I should give Elizabeth a test and see if she was really paying attention when I was talking last fall. We had a legal alert that was talking about diploma seals, and then at the end of that, I mentioned that there was a requirement for districts to have a policy in regards to at-risk kids, and this is it. So we'll be talking about that one. Policy 6107 is the electronic records and electronic signature policy, and you will see some changes to that one just to kind of strengthen it up a little bit and satisfy some of the federal programs you have to sign off on. So from there, we are going to go to the documents, and Susan has completed the revisions. So I'm going to go to the April 2020. The first policy we have is policy 1520. And you'll see this is the confirmation of licensure to the treasurer about administrators. So whenever you hire administrator, superintendent is going to have to provide the treasurer a statement that says all the administrators have all the proper license and any reports, meaning background checks that they may have. All right. Any questions? If you have a question, please just ask anytime. Okay. Otherwise,
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the time to bring this up or not, but where it says the contract shall not be for more than 5 years. I know that I've brought this up before, feeling like 5-year contracts are really long, especially in public education where your revenue isn't super guaranteed for 5 years. Is this something that how do you begin talking about that?
What I will tell you, Elizabeth, from my viewpoint, that language is statutory.
Okay.
That no less than 2 years and no more than 5. That's just revised code language.
Okay.
Where a district talks about that, I think that is a board discussion. That's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah, it probably is. I just saw it here, and
yeah,
we tend to lean toward 5, and I don't know that that's good practice.
I can pretty safely say out of the 51 districts that I serve in Southwest Ohio, that's not unusual.
Yeah.
And part of that reason is that, and I don't want to get philosophical on this meeting, but it's difficult to find really, really good people right now. And so when districts find really, really good people, they want to keep them. And that's where that comes into play.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's just from a business standpoint, if your revenue's not guaranteed for 5 years, it's puts you in a tough spot to guarantee someone a salary for 5 years. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. But that's something we can talk about another time.
Yeah, that's not a policy decision. Oh, I like to say that. Gifted identification. This is the piece about the opt-out service, and here's where this is being offered. And then the second piece where this is being updated, revised, is right here, because you'll see in accordance with laws. Now it's with timelines and other requirements of law. So minor changes, but it's something that isn't what the law says now, so you'll want to do that. Employment of professional staff, 3120. As I told you, No Child Left Behind took away highly qualified, so this is it. This is the requirements for teachers now. But I do want to point out the second sentence of this particular paragraph, because this is important for you to see. And I will tell you, Scott, this gives me a different perspective as when I present this, since we're on a YouTube channel. I'm a little hesitant on some of the things I'm sharing, but I got to do it. Because now, at the start of each school year, the superintendent shall notify parents, guardians of each student enrolled in the district that they may request information about the professional qualification of each classroom teacher who provides instruction to the student. This is a statement that you have to provide to everybody in the district that they can do this. Previously, with highly qualified, you had to notify parents when a teacher was not highly qualified when they were teaching one of the core academic subject areas. A little bit different take on this. A lot of people were talking, well, we'll put that on the website, but unfortunately, I think that what people have found in today's world, that not everybody has access. I would guess that the clientele in Forest Hills has a much higher accessibility rate than some of the districts that I serve right now. But so a lot of the discussion on that particular statement has been student handbooks. So just to point that out, and that is in that annual notice piece.
Tom, I don't know if it still exists, but throughout my administrative career, when we were sharing, let's say, the letter goes out. I don't have a problem with that. Folks, if you want to ask a question or you want to see, that's certainly. But in the past, when someone's personnel file was reviewed, that person generally sat with the person who was reviewing their personnel file.
I think that's a little bit different, Scott, in
Yeah.
that
So let's talk
this
about
wouldn't have to be personnel files.
right qualifications,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I
They
will
have a
say
teaching
that,
license. The qualifications is they have a teaching license. It's a 5-year license in this area. That's their professional qualifications. It's not
Well,
going through every piece of a personnel file.
you did say you were an interim in Forest Hills, right?
Aha.
Okay. So that's something that we need to.
Yeah,
We have a fantastic school district. We have great parents, great community, so forth and so on. But this is about the qualifications. This isn't about evaluations, and this isn't about things like that.
correct.
So, okay.
That is 100% correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, when I saw this piece come out, I kept thinking, anybody that wants to go to ODE's website, they can do a search to see if a teacher has a license. You can create a safe account and do that. That's pretty standard. A lot of people do that anyways. But yeah, this is not coming in and going through everybody's personnel file. This is, if they want the professional qualifications, you just, in my thought process, I'm probably going to go to ODE's website. I'm going to click on their link as to where their qualifications are, what the kind of a license they have, what it's in. I'm going to copy, and that's what they're going to get. That's their qualifications. And in order to be a teacher, you have to have a license. That's to qualifies you. So, and then the confirmation of licensure.
Sure.
Employment of substitutes. This is that piece that we're talking about, and this the board shall approve. That language was approved rather than employ, only because we knew that there were majority of the districts now are using COGS or a huge database of substitutes that they're not employing themselves. They're going through a different avenue to do that. So just remember, if they're going to be in a long-term position, and I will use a maternity leave, could be up to 8 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, sometimes even more. But let's say 6 weeks, it's 3 weeks in the first semester, and it's going to extend into the second semester. That person would have to be approved in the first semester, then again at the start of the second semester. So it doesn't say it's one semester. It doesn't say how many days. And that's the piece that has me a little bit puzzled, because it's a long term. It used to be long term, be more than 2 weeks, but that's how they have it listed now. So just be cautious of that when you're putting people in long-term positions. And we'll look at the guideline that gives some more responsibility to the principals in that as well. 31-2005, summer school adult ed, and nothing here but the confirmation of licensure to the treasurer. 31-20.08, and this is pupil activity permits. And I see a big yes in the blank, and that is optional language. And the Tom Durbin opinion is that that is the best way to go. I'm going to share a story of another district that called me in January and said, we need your help. And I said, all right, what do you need? It's, well, the treasurer and I are standing here and we have a letter from the state auditor, and they're doing a findings for recovery for almost $18,000 against 5 of our coaches. And without thinking and what I was saying, I said, well, I don't give donations for findings for recovery, so I can't help you there. How else can I help? And they said, well, we have it in our language. And I didn't tell them they should be reading their policies, but I said, yes, you have that language in your policy that they have to have that. And they went on about how they can't find coaches and all, but it's not a choice as to whether or not you do this. This is now a requirement. So by putting the option in here, what you're saying there is that a coach or an activity sponsor who's required to have that pupil activity permit cannot engage in coaching or supervision until they have that license or permit. So that's the smart way to go, and the Tom Durbin opinion. You're also going to see this exact same language in policy 41-2008 and also an administrative guideline here in just a little bit. Employment of classified staff. This is the one in which I told you the requirements for paraprofessionals is a little bit changed here. Then also with the qualification piece, because the title is a parapro is doing some one-on-one, they have to have the qualifications of a Title I paraprofessional. People could ask for that qualification. It's simple as, here it is, here's their certificate. Confirmation of licensure, same thing. Okay. 41-20.08, and we are with the co-curricular, extracurricular, student activity permit, pupil activity permit, excuse me, and you have put in the same option, which is the way to go. Okay. 41-24. Yeah, you don't have a city. You have, and that's civil service. You have the local piece, and this is that change. And you do have classified employees who are not members of a bargaining unit. And here's the 3, the 1 year, then 3, 2 years for 7 years. Looks like teachers have to have now. And yes, you mark the box because you do have a contract sequence and a collective bargaining agreement. It's the way I take that. So that one's all good. All right, CDL license holders. And what I want to point out, and this is for board members and administrators and whomever else, but you'll see the title says drug and alcohol testing of CDL license holders and other employees who perform safety sensitive functions. And in our policy, we refer to the drivers, but we also refer to others who perform safety sensitive functions with board owned and or operated vehicles. Okay, must be physically and mentally alert. And the reason I point that out is that it is a district's choice as to who they designate as performing safety sensitive functions. That's not a Neola decision. I will tell you that I have districts that have vans, and if someone wants to drive a van with kids in it, they have determined that driver to be someone performing a safety sensitive function, and they are part of the drug testing. I have a district or two that says that guys that are driving school trucks, plowing snow, or performing safety sensitive functions. They have drug testing. So there's all different kinds of situations in which you could look at that, but it's a district choice. You'll see some minor changes in the language here, and this is all due to federal regulations. But just like this piece on this one, staff member admits to failing a test or refused, they're not permitted to perform safety sensitive functions until they complete the return to duty process. This is type of information that the drivers or the safety people performing safety sensitive need to be aware of. Just like this one about using alcohol within 4 hours or performing safety sensitive function within 4 hours of using alcohol. They just can't do it. But one of the pieces that really has caught my eye is this one that I see highlighted. Refraining from the use of alcohol for 8 hours following the accident or until undergoing a post-accident alcohol test, whichever occurs first. And I forget, Scott, where the drivers go to get their drug or alcohol test down there. But in some districts, if a driver is coming back from a late night ball game and they have an accident and they need to go get an alcohol drug test, and the testing facility is closed and they can't get there till the next morning, they need to be aware that they can't use alcohol when they get home for 8 hours following the accident. So this is important information that people need to be aware of. You going down, you'll see the request for a split specimen within 72 hours. Then you'll see some changes as far as language in regards to federal law access. Just some minor things here. Notification, this is new. This is a big one. So, it talks about the testing and it talks about the notification, but also talks about reporting the test results. And this goes back to that information for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. And this is a piece that I really want to emphasize, and I've done this to every district that I've been in so far, it's over 40. It talks about educational materials. This has been in play now for a couple of years. That CDL license holders and others who perform safety sensitive functions will be provided educational materials, okay, that discuss the policies and procedures and so forth at the time of hire. The materials will include at a minimum the information contained in A through M. Okay. And it's not as simple as just copying A through M and saying, here's the materials, because it talks about information concerning prohibited conduct, just different pieces in here you need to read to make sure you get the proper materials. It then goes on to say that they'll be distributed to each staff member if they're being hired or transferred into a covered position. They've deleted some language about refusing to sign a statement, so that now says each staff member will receive a copy of the materials and must sign a statement certifying receipt of such materials. If they refuse to sign, they can't perform safety sensitive or drive. That's the bottom line. Okay. So I just want to emphasize that point. Yeah.
Who in Forest Hills handles all this? Like, say we would have an incident like this. John, is this you?
In cooperation with Richard, yes. Whenever there's a reason for testing, Richard and I talk. He does the day-to-day management of it, but yes, we're in collaboration.
Well, and does this end up looping in HR too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if there's a negative or a positive test, I guess I should say, or if they're testing because of an accident, that is all HR is involved with that also. Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Anything else on this one? This is an important one. All right. 5460. Graduation requirements. All right. So, Susan, for you, I'm going to do something here because, and maybe it's not letting me go to my edit button. Here we go. There's a guideline listed right here that has been deleted. And so we need to get rid of that. So I'll do it for you so you don't have to worry about it. Then there's an option. Let me, excuse me for doing this while I'm here, but makes it easier. And this particular paragraph, there is an option here about the 2 additional options to earn a high school diploma. Everybody so far has chosen to put that in. It has to do with those optional pathways. And I don't know, you guys marked these. I don't know if you just marked this and somebody missed it or whatever, but that's the additional pathways. And it talks about these on down into this policy. You might want to think about putting that in. Course credits. Okay, so you're fine here. Just the pathways that now have to be done. So on this piece right here on mathematics, my question, Scott, is whether or not you are offering an advanced computer science course in lieu of kids taking Algebra 2.
I don't think we're doing that, Tom.
And I haven't found anybody yet that is. So, Susan, what I would suggest to you, if you're not doing that,
Take it off.
This particular, just take all this out.
Okay.
You see what I'm doing there? Because you don't need, well, in fact, you can do it this way. If you'd like for me to, I'll just hit delete so it goes
Sure,
away
that'd be
for you.
great. That'd be great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Because you're not, that's one that I haven't found anybody doing it yet. And if you do that, then you have to have the parents sign a statement saying it might affect college entrance. The next question has to do with computer science, as to whether or not you're offering a computer science course in lieu of one of your regular science courses. If you're not, then you don't want to add this computer science piece right here. You guys can have that conversation. Science and social studies, you'll want to make that corrections. Then with the electives of fine arts, what they've added here is computer coding. If you're not offering a computer coding course, then as an elective, you don't want to put that in, but that was the changes to that. Then you'll see under letter B down here, outlined, as we say, state now in accordance with state, different languages. Do you guys, don't you do a show choir?
Yep. Yes.
I'm gonna pull something up here real quick just so I can compare. Because that was a change that was added. I can't remember if it was last fall or last spring. I think it was last spring. In regards to show choir being, yeah, you didn't put it in. Show choir can now be used as a PE waiver if you so chose to do so. I just remember being down there with the show choir was pretty good, and I didn't know if that was something you decide not to do. That's a district choice. What do I do here? All right, when you come on down into this language, then we get into the state graduation requirements. You'll see these class 19 through class 22. And here are those 2 additional pathways that I mentioned up at the top for the class of 19 and 20. The career tech academic, and then you get to the class of 2023. All right, and you did mark the option here, that's good. And then the seals, and you have mentioned you have in here all 3 of the optional seals. And I'll tell you that we do have a guideline in this particular update that gives you some assistance, maybe if you need some, on developing the requirements for each of those 3 seals. And then you have the state requirements, you're good there, all that. And then you have this language was added. We've always known this, it's a privilege, it's not a right, but I guess because of other clients who have requested that, they put that in the language now. But you still can't hold a diploma for something. Any questions on graduation? I fully expect to see some more come the fall.
I'm pretty certain we will,
All right.
because the debate is still happening across the state right now.
Yeah, there's going to be more.
So this was
We're already working on stuff.
this came down before everything changed recently, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. This information was actually we discussed quite a bit of this back in December at our update meeting. This particular update was published February 1st.
Okay. Good.
So there's been a whole lot of difference in there.
Well, Elizabeth,
There's another piece.
my thinking that the COVID shouldn't change the requirements for graduation. It may adjust some of the things we're doing with kids depending upon how they're impacted.
Mm-hmm.
The requirements, the seals and things like that, that hasn't necessarily been impacted by COVID, unless Tom knows something that I don't.
No, you're exactly right. As of right now, you're right on track. And remind me, Scott, before I finish, well, when I finish, I want to show you or point you in the direction of a resolution that we have provided to our clients in regards to the House Bill 197, which made some of those adjustments because of the COVID. 5460.02. This is your students at risk of not qualifying for a high school diploma policy. This is the one that I talked about last fall that you would be getting. And so I'm going to point out some pieces in here for everybody. That's a big one. The district will develop a graduation plan for each student enrolled in grades 9 through 12. Now, this particular policy was supposed to have been adopted by June 30th of this year. And because of House Bill 197, this has been adjusted. And you now have to have this policy in place by September 30th of this coming school year. And I did not see anything in the language that says you could put off doing graduation plans for this coming school year. So this would be every kid that would have this plan. And it talks here that it will be developed between the student and a district representative. And for those of us who have been around the block a few times, we remember the previous career passport, and this is career passport 2.0. stays in effect the whole time they're in high school, updated annually. And I see that you have chosen not to put this piece in about IEPs. What this was saying is that if you had an IEP that had some goals that are substantively similar to graduation plan, that you could use that IEP rather than have to do another graduation plan. You've chosen not to put that piece in. Criteria for identifying students at risk. All right, letter A is a lack of adequate progress in meeting the terms. We provided you some options that you could have used if you chose to. Someone has chosen not to, which is fine. But for Susan and Scott and Elizabeth, you've got to know me over the last year or so. You know that sometimes I just can't keep my mouth shut. I have to say what I think. So I'm going to say it again on here, because on this particular one, excessive tardies or absences, a lot of times that's a key indicator that kids aren't doing A, and also with the discipline issues. So just something to give you food for thought, have a discussion on.
Yeah. So
And I'm not going to, I don't want to get into the politics of it.
well,
but
that's the thing is these things do tend to bring up politics, because if
I know.
if you don't include everything, then you left out this one thing, and then if you include too much, so people, it tends to cause more trouble than it's worth. Is that why we struck these out, just to simplify it? Yeah, and leave some freedom. Okay.
And that's okay. I just
I'm-
know that when you have,
Big part of the school district's cultures,
Mm-hmm.
corner personalizing, and so that all will impact individualized discussions with students and families. Like you said, Elizabeth, if you put 25 in there, you forgot the 26.
Yeah.
So our goal in Forest Hills is to work very closely with kids, counselors, teachers, families, to address these as we move along, as students are working towards earning a diploma. And we're actually seeing some of that right now.
Mhm.
This policy, if it was passed 4 months or 6 weeks ago, would say nothing about access to technology or the ability to whatever. So anyway, I don't want to get too far into it. Our purpose here is not to not do something for kids, but actually to be able to have ability and adaptability if we come across a problem like this.
And I went back and looked at the notes that came from teaching and learning on this policy. And the reason they did not choose those options is they felt that would better be suited in an administrative guideline rather than the policy. What are your thoughts about that?
Are you talking to me, Susan? I think that
Anyone
there-
who will answer.
I think there's going to be an administrative guideline come out in the fall on this. And I think the administrative guideline is probably going to give you some direction on how you might do this. And as far as when you identify kids at risk, then, because you'll see the next section of this, the development procedures for identifying. And this is determining a method when a student's not making adequate progress, as why. And I have not seen the administrative guidelines, so I'm really hesitant to make any comments about what might be in it because I don't know.
That was my next question. Did Neola have guidelines? Because our teaching and learning team have developed some guidelines that they would like to use.
Well, by all means, because when that guideline comes out in the fall, then if you have things already set up, then copy and paste and put them in there and make sure you put in what you're using, because that's the purpose of administrative guideline, is to actually have what a district is using and not just
Okay.
something because Neola has it. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great.
The other piece of this is that after you identify kids at risk, then it is required that once a kid has been identified at risk and at least annually thereafter, the district will provide parents or guardians with written notice. And the notice will include letter A, fact they're at risk for not getting a diploma. B, what are the curriculum requirements? And also then what do they have to do to satisfy the requirements for diploma? And then C, what's the district doing to help them? And that has to go out each year that kid remains at risk. So when you do graduation plans for Anderson and Turpin High School, first of all, there's what, 2,300 kids total. And then the at-risk kids, you're going to have those notices and what you're doing. Then
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, well, wouldn't the description of additional instructional interventions and supports, won't that kind of be a part of their graduation plan anyway? Or does this have to be a separate report?
I think that's on the notices. This intervention and supports would definitely be a part of that. Okay, what are you doing to help the kid?
Yeah, I mean,
But as far as the graduation plan itself, in the Tom Durbin world, I'm looking at, okay, what does it take for me to graduate from high school? So that first year, I'm going to use my freshman year and I'm going to put out the courses that I need to take in order to get the proper credits in my freshman year in order to be able to move on to that sophomore year and how to build on that.
mm-hmm.
But then that sophomore year, when I'm looking at that plan again, and all of a sudden I realize I failed Algebra 1. So I'm going to have to adjust my plan a little bit as to how I'm going to get that 4 years of math in. And then, I think when I send, as a principal, when I send that notice out to that parent, Johnny's in danger of not getting a diploma because he doesn't have the proper math credits. So what we've done, he has to take Algebra 1, but then he's going to have to go on to geometry. But in the meantime, what we're going to do to help him, we're going to provide him in a tutoring program or one of these other options that you possibly have at your disposal to help him get through those math credits. And that would be my notice to that parent. So when I see the intervention and supports here, it says they'll provide for students identified at risk, and that's what we do. And I'm going to say this as a former high school principal and also as a former superintendent, that I didn't do a very good job of making sure I notified parents of every kid that was at risk. And a lot of times we knew the kids at risk when they walked in the door of the high school because of how they did at the middle school. But the piece that when I first looked at this intervention supports, when it was being presented to us, and as the school administrator, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm not putting all that stuff in there, which is similar to what I see here. But then when I read it a little bit closer, and after talking with a whole lot of superintendents and curriculum people, intervention and supports may include the following. So then I had a list that I can use to determine which one of those might help that kid that's failing math. Or, if I had a kid that was constantly being suspended from school and they're missing all types of work and they're in danger of failing for not getting their work done, maybe a mentoring program would help them if that's what we have in place. So this was put out there, and some superintendents that I've met with already, they like this list and they've actually added to it. I have other superintendents say, well, we don't have the capacity to do all this. Okay. If you don't have all the capacity to do all this, then don't put them all in. Put in what you do to help kids. And that way, when it's out there, when you do your guidelines, you're going to figure out which ones you have in your policy and what you can do. So it's up to each district to make that decision. It's your
Tom,
call.
this is the other list that they wanted in guidelines as well.
And I think that, yeah,
Our district, I would imagine, and I haven't been in, I haven't been in a intense conversation with our principals on this one, but if you take a look at the district's graduation rate,
yeah,
you will see that hopefully the data will suggest that the Forest Hills School District is working closely with families. And I would agree, Tom, that we don't necessarily send a letter,
hmm
a letter to parents. That hasn't necessarily been our methodology. But what I would say here is yes to that. I like your points about May because there's always another thing you can do, and one list is never going to be accurate because there's always something else depending upon the student.
yep,
But what I would say in this district is that we have a good graduation rate,
oh
and
yeah,
we have good counseling, and we have people in tune. So for this Forest Hills School District, I think probably the only significant change would be that we're actually sending a formal letter that would suggest that the child is at risk. Other than that, we're linked in pretty tightly the whole way, kindergarten through 12.
yeah. Your graduation rate, Scott, is just, in comparison to the other 51 school districts that I serve, you're right there at the top of the list. So this one's not going to be a huge issue like it is for some districts. So, but that's what's nice about policy. It's broad terms, and districts develop. They pick out the ones they want. That's why all these little boxes are all choices, and there's also blanks. One of the things that came up in one discussion is an intervention with career advising. They have what they call student success plans on that piece, and they're taking that and they're throwing that in here for a student success plan, then they're at risk. So everybody's going to be different on this one, and it's what a district chooses to do. 6107, electronic records and signatures. You'll see some language here putting measures to protect the integrity, security, and accessibility of electronic signatures and records. And I don't know if it's because of fraud or what this is all about, but the Uniform Electronic Transaction Act. So this is language that's being recommended to you, and I would suggest you put it in like you have. All right. Yeah, so the other thing in regards to policy and board members, I just want to go to local policy update. And we did a special release. And with that special release, you'll see we had a sample resolution, and that was a contingency plan for the 1920 school year. And I know that a lot of my districts in Hamilton, Claremont County were already looking at possible resolutions. Susan, I'm going to go ahead and copy this for you. You may just want to delete them all once I do this. Is that all right?
Yes, that's fine, Tom. Thank you.
And I just want to point this out because we were talking there earlier about the graduation pieces for this year and so forth. And this was all because of House Bill 197. So this was just a sample resolution Neola provided. It's totally district's choice as to what they want to do. What I want to point out to you is there's a lot of blanks in here. Okay. And it talks all about the mixed up, the makeup time, so forth, the plan. There's just a lot of pieces in here that you'll want to take a look at. About the assignments they're doing now. And since they're now closed school, this just came out in April, but this was just prior So I think it might have been just prior to, no, it might have been about the same time they closed schools for good. But you'll see the whole piece about intervention support. So this is out there. If you want to use it, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. This is the piece about board meetings during the emergency. I know this was a hot topic in regards to electronic meetings. Are you guys done electronic meetings now?
Yes.
Good. And Scott, in regards to COVID, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, I think this is something that you might have been referring to when you were talking about employees and all.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one that you may want to take a close look at. Just information. All right. Was Leslie able to join us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, Leslie. I'm Tom.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Well, I would prefer it to be in person because I much rather do these in person than I do than because I get to see people's faces.
Hey, Tom, can
Yeah.
I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
We're also going to review a policy, and I know it's not part of the update, but it's a treasurer requested policy, and it's the it's 6325,
Yep,
and
I
it's
saw.
procurement of federal grants. This is something that we need to adopt a change due to an auditor request.
Yep.
Have you had any other districts make any changes to this policy?
Yep, I have.
Okay. All right.
And it must be because of a particular auditor in Southwest Ohio.
Yeah.
Because I've had multiple requests from districts in regards to this policy. Excuse my alarm for going off, but my granddaughter must be outside and my dog doesn't like her being out there without him. So when I go through here, I see this, one of the pieces that I'm just going to make this comment for Alana, and this is this piece right here. And you may want to reconsider that statement about annual or continuously. And the only reason I say that is the list that they're referring to there is a list in which you have already checked the state auditor's website to make sure that a vendor does not have any, I don't know, is it findings for recovery or findings for something? I can't remember the title off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's findings for recovery.
All right. So if you agree to do that continuously, then that means anybody that would want to be a vendor, once they tell you that, you have to go out and get that certificate to make sure they're not on that list. And that's what I've been told by other treasurers. That's not a Tom Durbin. And so
Yeah.
what a lot of people did, they put in annually on that list just so they didn't have to do it ongoing basis every time someone would pop in and want to be a vendor. Strictly your choice, but I'm going to share with you what other treasurers have mentioned to me. So
You know,
then,
I appreciate that and absolutely would like to change it to that. We do check continuously, but I think we want these policies to allow us the maximum flexibility. So that's a good recommendation, and I would like to change it to that if the policy committee members are okay with that.
So I can see both sides. The reason I liked continuously actually that it was changed to that because I have heard from people in the past who have approached us about, whether it was insurance or just becoming some other kind of vendor, and that we immediately shut them down and said, no, we're all set. We've got so and so. It's not open. I've heard that from at least 2 vendors that I have off the top of my head. So that was not under your treasurership. So I guess,
Well, let me just point one thing out, Elizabeth, with this,
yeah.
because we're talking about procurements with federal funds only with this policy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We're not talking about procurements from the general fund, so to
Okay,
speak.
good. Okay, that's different.
Because this piece, this whole title is procurement with federal grants or funds. So and a lot of, if I'm speaking out of turn, just tell me to shut up. I'm fine with that. I get told that by my wife sometimes.
No, you're not.
With vendors from general fund, you do not have to do the findings for recovery for every vendor. For federal funds, you do. And you have to keep a certificate on file that they don't have a findings for recovery against them. And so when you put, be real honest with you, don't buy as much with federal funds as you do general fund by any means. Most, and I forget what it was, but from remember my time there, a lot of the federal monies went towards salaries and benefits for staffing more so than anything else.
That's the vast majority of it, yes.
Aren't federal funds more linked to a yearly or 6-month calendar anyway, a cyclical calendar?
Mm-hmm.
Because federal funds they're not going to change how that money is distributed, and so our contracts are done almost on an annual basis for the federal funds anyway.
Right.
And the
You
other
do the CCIP in July and August, and you know what you're going to have.
More about, I think, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think what we're talking about is making sure that we have open access across the board for those things where they're happening, and we need to make sure that more people are aware because they're not linked to a schedule that's actually and required by the federal government.
So when we get down here to procurement methods, and I just want to, I'm going to speak to this because when this policy came out, it was a part of the Edgar collection. The Edgar collection was the Education Department's General Administrative Regulations in regards to federal funds. And when this template came out, you'll see it does not say choose one or more of the following. But in the first paragraph, it does say that procurement, supply of materials, federal funds, or district matching funds shall be made in accordance with all federal, state, local statutes, regulations. Well, a lot of treasurers at the time, they said, we don't want to put all these in. We're going to follow procurement methods by law, and we just don't want to put these in. So I know in my case, when I called the office and asked, is this a requirement? I was told, no, as long as they're following their procurement methods. And if they're asked, they're able to tell which procurement method they had, then they're going to be okay. Well, all of a sudden, this spring, last winter, in Southwest Ohio, I've had multiple districts, primarily Hamilton County, that have requested these procurement methods because an auditor has told them they have to have these in policy. All right. It hasn't reached the eastern part of my territory yet. It probably will. So the numbers that you've put in here, just like micro purchases, this matches up, if I remember correctly, with your policy 6320, which is purchase and bidding. And the reason that's important, that if you would have had $5,000 in policy 6320, then the federal law says that you have to use your most restrictive policy. So for micro purchases, you would have had to use what was in 6320 other than what the federal maximum is of 10,000. So at the time this came out, most districts changed their 6320 to $10,000 for the quotes and all. That's a good thing to have. you have this 250,000. You'll see that that is somewhat different than what the state bidding process is, and you keep that in mind because you're still talking here services supplies and other property, and that's 250. Sealed bids, you'll see this is a little bit different because with Ohio law, the only thing you're required to bid general fund monies are those for building projects now. You guys are well aware of that one.
Mhm.
You got this one okay. Yep, that's good. Competitive proposals, okay. You got that one. And that's a good way to put these from an adequate number of qualified suppliers rather than putting a specific number in. And that's why I'm just double checking you had it here. And then you also have it down here on this one. So that's you're consistent. And that's a very important piece. And a non-competitive, you're good. So I think that this will more than satisfy what the auditors are wanting from you, Alana. So
Okay, good. Thank you.
and
Can I
that's-
just clarify, are we keeping the word continuously?
I think Tom pointed out that in the federal grants, the continuously isn't as essential as we originally thought, and that an annual or maybe biannual, or excuse me, yeah, biannual term might work. I don't know. That's up to Alana.
Yeah,
Well-
I think it's whatever Atlanta wants.
Well,
What would you like, Alana?
I think Tom recommended annual. It's always good to be consistent amongst the school districts too, so
Well-
the auditors get.
I'm gonna make one statement. I'm not recommending. I'm telling you what other districts have. I'm not a treasurer, and I go with what treasurers tell me on this one because they're the ones that are doing that work. You know, as a superintendent, I never had to go look for a findings for recovery. And I think, are you guys usually still using Bonefish?
We do.
Yeah, that's a good program for that. And that's where I learned a lot about this whole findings for recovery piece of working with Bonefish. And they can do it. I mean, if someone comes in, this doesn't say that they can only do it one time. This says that a vendor is allowed to be placed on the list continuously. It doesn't mean you can't do it whenever you want to do it either. It's
Well,
just talking about vendors coming in and asking for that. So, and
we will continue to use Bonefish and check that more than annually, but it always gives us that maximum flexibility, and I always like to either meet or exceed what our policy says. So I think we put in annually, that gives us good flexibility, but we'll continue to strive to exceed that checkpoint.
And I think if you look at the other districts in Hamilton County, you're probably going to see that word annually in a lot of them that have board docs anyways.
Yeah. So if
Kind of
everyone
little
wants
records.
that change, I would like to change it to annually then.
Okay, I'll change it.
Thank you.
All right. So Scott, my question, do you want me to continue with administrative guidelines on your YouTube channel? Do you want to just, because it's not policy, it's guidelines.
no, I think that we're good with the policy section. The rest of the guidelines are yet to be worked out.
Tom,
Okay.
did we need to go over 8450 and 8420.01, the ones that just came out about the pandemic?
No, I don't. And the reason
Okay.
I don't, those were a special update. And that was just basically, it was reissuing a policy. If you had it, fine. If you didn't, that's fine too. It's your choice. There weren't
Okay.
any changes to it. And they just wanted to reissue that so people, if they wanted to look at it again, they could.
Okay, policy committee, we do not currently have 8420.01. Betsy did say that she thought that this would be a safe option to adopt this policy. So I sent it to you in an email because it was something that just came up.
Here it is right here.
Yeah, I actually, I was kind of glad to see that this existed. So I do think we probably should adopt it. But I actually had a question on it. There wasn't anything about sanitizing and cleaning plan or about building shutdowns. So those were just two things that I know were pretty big deals that we immediately had to handle. And so I
Right.
wasn't sure if that should be in there or not.
Let me make a comment, if I might, Elizabeth, because this is not what you're doing, and that's why I would make sure you take a look at this again, because what this is saying, this 8420.01,
Mm-hmm.
what it's saying is that you're going to establish a pandemic response team to
Mhm.
develop a pandemic plan. And these are some things that probably should be in the plan itself. Okay. This is not telling you to do anything differently. And that's why
But this
this one came out in 2006.
Mm.
And this was at the time of bird flu,
Oh.
bird flu, swine flu. And I can tell you that I don't know if I have any clients that actually took this. And the reason they didn't take it, and a lot of reasons why people don't take this when we draft policies now, is they tell me, why do I need a policy to develop a plan? That should be just something we can do on our own without having a policy saying we have to have a plan. And that's why
Well,
they
I
didn't
mean,
do it. So it's your choice.
yeah,
I'll just point that
yeah,
out.
yeah. I don't, Scott, I definitely want you to weigh in, but I mean, I can see the value in. I mean, some people might choose not to put together a plan.
Oh yeah.
We of course would, because that's how Forest Hills operates. But um, I don't know. I actually thought it would be helpful because it would give you some reminders of what to do. But Scott, why were you shaking your head so violently?
We are working very closely in our school district with the governor's office, with all of our affiliate agencies, with all of the Ohio Department of Education, the Ohio School Board Association, the rulings that come from the governor that then establish protocol from that point forward based on what the state of Ohio is doing. This is a list of things that are important, and I would suggest that if you took a look at this, Forest Hills is actually doing probably every one and more. But
Mhm.
it is a policy. It might not really address everything that happens when we have an emergency situation where we're working, and so then we're stuck with a policy that is a good policy. It's proactive, it's trying to do the right thing, but it might not be following along. And then we've got a policy that's guiding us in a direction that isn't flexible, adaptable, and meeting the needs of current pandemic or emergency that's happening in our state or around the country or world. So absolutely, Elizabeth, I'm 100% in agreement with you that this is a great list of things and we should be doing all of this. As a superintendent, I would be a little reluctant to have a list that was done in 2006 address the issues that we're dealing with in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it was surprisingly applicable, though. That's what I thought. I couldn't believe that it had come from there. Yeah, I just thought, because I know in our business when this all happened, we kind of scattered, like, okay, what do we need to put in place? And having something like this on the books that you can quickly pull out in a crisis, because you're rallying people and you are changing procedures and things on the fly. So I don't know, maybe we just put this somewhere else. If it doesn't go in policy, John Eckert,
I was just going to bring this up. A lot of this is in the emergency management plan.
right. Okay, great.
I mean, when all this first calming down, that's the first thing we referenced was the actual EMP.
We're even working with Homeland Security
Yeah, I know.
locally.
Okay. Leslie, do you have any, I don't know, any opinions on this one at all?
You're muted, Leslie.
Sorry about that. Are we ever gonna remember that? As many Zoom and meetings we have like this. I'm almost afraid to have an opinion because I'm new and kind of taking all of this in. I was writing notes down, and I think what Elizabeth said made sense, that we just would have a team. I mean, why wouldn't we, right? I don't know. It just seems kind of like a natural thing that we would do. So I don't. defer to the ones with more experience here stuff. But I thought what she said really put it into context for me.
I'm going to weigh in here for a minute because of all the districts I work with. And I think John Eckert hit the nail on the head, because a lot of districts, when they got this special release, they just looked at it and said, wait a minute, we already have this information in our emergency management plan that's already been approved.
Yeah.
Are there some pieces that we need to strengthen now? We have a better idea of what a pandemic actually is. Yeah. But this policy, and I'm going to reiterate the fact that all this says is you're going to have a plan, and the plan should include. It doesn't say the plan must include. It doesn't say will include. It says should include. So these are suggestions for a plan. And I do policy, but this is one I don't typically suggest.
I'm of the opinion that too many policies are too many policies.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Because, okay.
Yeah. No.
It's the board's committee, and the board has you were representing, and if the board is saying that they believe that they would like to have something like this, I would refer to Tom's comments and John's. If you go to the emergency management plan that we have, you'll find all of this and more. You'll also see that we are working with several agencies, and in our district, we're working with Homeland Security on even our bus routing and things like that. So the Forest Hills School District is greatly interested in safety and security of its students, staff, and its families and communities. So I don't look at this list and say, oh my goodness, this is a problem for me. I say, yes, we have that. Yes, we have that. Yes, we have that. I have a policy on a shelf when I've got a working committee that's doing it, and they meet regularly to review all of these things.
Yeah. So I would say this is when it's fortunate that I spent 2 years on the safety committee. Because I know you're right, and I can vouch for that, and that is truly why when this came across, I was like, oh yeah, we did all this. I was just thinking it may have helped you if this was already, if this was just in front of us. But I am from a board perspective, totally confident that John's got everything under control, and I don't think we need to add it because I trust you guys. So it's a good list, though.
Yeah. And then the other one was just a casual contact communicable diseases. You already have that one in place. There's some diseases, and this is one that there have been a couple of districts that I know of that have added the coronavirus to their list. That's all they've done to it. So, all right. And with as far as the guidelines go, they were pretty sampled to do. There's nothing in there that's earth-shattering, primarily confirmation of licensure. But there is the one that I would encourage you to share with your teaching and learning, and that is the one about diploma seals, because they do provide you with some guidance as to some things you might want to think about as far as what the criteria would be for each one of the 3 optional seals. So, and then the other one, just John, this might be for you. The 553001, I think it is, and it has to do with steroids, the anabolic steroid policy that has been updated,
Okay.
and it needs to be posted in locker rooms.
Yes. Thank you.
So other than that, your guidelines are in pretty good shape there, Scott.
Thank you. I unmuted.
Okay. Anybody else, any questions? Or it's my goal to be back in your district next fall for a face-to-face meeting. I was just thinking, I'm looking outside, the sun's shining, my granddaughter's out front, and I could have walked out of your office and got in the little car and put the top down and had a nice drive home down along the river. But, oh, well.
Well, Tom, this has been a difficult circumstance, and I know you've got a lot of districts hounding you right now to go over these things because of the environment that we're in. I want to thank you on behalf of our board for making this happen. And I also want to thank our board members who are busy at work and doing a lot of things and taking 2 hours of their life to get into this meeting and work with us. I certainly appreciate that, and it means a lot to us as your employees. And I want to thank Susan Monk for coordinating all of this, because without Susan, this would be a pretty difficult thing to pull off. So thank you all for your participation. And if you're listening in out there in policy cyberland, thank you very much for getting a taste of the many things that come towards the school district and the many professionals that we have working with us. We're a lucky district, and we've got good people working with us and counseling us on the best decisions to make for the safety, security, and the best educational opportunities for our students.
And this was a first for me, Scott. I've never done an update on YouTube, so.
You can
Well,
add it to your resume now.
Yeah,
Seems to be doing this, and it's really nice that they're leaning in and they're paying attention and they're listening. So it's actually,
yeah, it is.
it's a good thing that we have more people available to, or who are able to participate this way, who maybe otherwise couldn't attend the meeting. So it's actually been a positive thing for us.
I'm going to share it with our corporate office that I think this is probably a first. So
Another, one more first on your.
hey, you know what? As long as I keep adding first, that means I'm still going strong. So,
Thank you all very much. Have a good
thank you.
Thank
Elizabeth, if you could please adjourn the meeting.
Oh, okay. Make a motion to adjourn the meeting of the policy committee.
I second.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all for agreeing to do it like this today. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Tom.
All right.
Thanks. Go
Talk to y'all
outside.